Welcome to the Google Hangout. My name's Nigel Payne and I'm speaking to you live from the Learning Technologies Conference in Olympia. And I'm lucky enough today to be talking to Emma Barrow. Emma is the head of digital learning at the Royal Mail. And both of us must be really, really cool people because we're wearing Apple Watches, both of us, unknown to each other. So we have this bond already and we've only just started. So I'm going to start by asking Emma a couple of questions. So Royal Mail is going through unbelievable change.
Yeah.
Massive, massive change from being a public company to being a private company, all the changes in technology, even letters are no longer important. It's all about parcels. Everything is changing in the Royal Mail. Where does digital learning slot into that big melee?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you say the change from public company to private company, all that kind of change that's come along with that. But actually, I've been there 7 years and the change has never stopped since the day I've walked through the door. So even when we were a public company, the change was happening. Now, we were actually, and I think because of the size and scope of the company, I've got managers who live closer to Norway than they do the mainland UK, and they operate, out in the Highlands and Islands. So due to the scope and size of the company, we were fairly early adopters for e-learning. So what you call digital learning now, e-learning of the past. So we were fairly early adopters of that. And although I've only been here 7 years, I know that they've been using it for 10 years or more. So very, very early adopters. But as a result, that then kind of stagnated a little bit. So they found it very useful for getting out to these people in very remote areas, but didn't really use it to its full potential. Very much the click next style of e-learning. And we just had one person in the team who had any knowledge of digital learning, and everyone else was a traditional L&D practitioner. So we brought in the digital learning team about 8 months ago now, June last year, and I head it up and we've got a team of 5. And we've very much been quite disruptive to the way that L&D operates in a world of change in Royal Mail. So we've come in and we've looked at how we can reduce the amount of face-to-face stuff that's going on, which is obviously the typical haunt of digital, is to try and reduce that face-to-face, but also actually bring in some completely new things that we never even did face-to-face before. As exactly what you said, rapidly bring in content and learning items to people at times of real big change.
So can you give me an indication of how much things have changed? Can you take me to me being someone experiencing digital learning at Royal Mail 5 years ago, say, and me being someone experiencing digital learning tomorrow or today? What's the difference?
I mean, there's a couple of things. Architecture-wise, we've completely changed our LMS. So we've gone from a very user-friendly system that had absolutely terrible interface. It was never designed with the user in mind. It was designed with compliance in mind. So we've got a new LMS now that's much nicer on the eye, and it helps users engage more. So we've had that for about 12 months now, and item completions are up over 100% year on year. And that's with almost no sort of extra effort. But then on top of that, so we got the architecture right, and I don't think it's perfect. I personally wish we didn't have to have an LMS. I wish things like compliance didn't fulfill the need of it, because I much prefer a more organic way of doing it, and I think it is better for the learner, but we have to have it, it's important. So we got the structure right, and then content. So the content that we put on is a lot different. So I am a big believer in talking to my learners. So I talk to people as much as possible about what they'd experienced before, what they didn't like. There was a lot of mistrust of e-learning 5-6 years ago. So as I said, early adopters, but didn't really do a lot with it. So I think people now are starting to trust that we deliver great content for them. We take a lot of time to speak to them to make it realistic. When we're using video and things like that, it's realistic. The scripting is well done. We've just really made some really quite small changes, but they've added up to quite a big change, I think, for the user.
So more engaging, easier to use, more successful, more colourful.
Yeah, it's shorter.
There
was a 4-hour safety course that I inherited when I took over. And I said, I love some things in life. I like eating, drinking, shopping. Doing them for 4 hours would bore me, really. And let alone sitting in front of a piece of e-learning. So shorter, snappier. Which is never anyone's favourite topic, is it?
So how do you deliver it to the learner? Is it free choice, or does a learner have to get through so much in a week or a month or a year? How do you organise the learning in the organisation?
It's interesting because we typically, I think big organisations tend to organise their learning around times of change.
Yeah.
So onboarding and induction,
Yeah.
moving into a leadership role, etc. And I think that's definitely the right approach, because that's when, as an individual, you actually got the appetite.
You perk up your ears.
You really want to do
you're
it.
Focused.
So, you know, we have that, and then what we've done with that kind of times of onboarding and change, we've put it much more, as far as possible, outside of the mandatory space. So there's absolutely things that we have to have. There's safety, there's security, there's compliance, all that kind of great stuff that you absolutely need to do, and it doesn't have to be boring, but it has to be done. And then everything else, we very much tried to go down a mandatory approach, and not mandatory approach, a complete voluntary approach. Yeah, and for the parts of the business that are a little bit uncomfortable, we kind of go for a middle ground that's a recommended approach rather than mandatory. So we very much tried to put the tools in the user's hands to search content better, to access it better, but actually use their own free will to go and do it. And it's slower. It is slower than beating people with a mandatory stick, but we still get really high completions. We still get plus 90% completions of target audiences. It's just a little bit slower. So once we've educated sort of our SMEs and internal customers about that it'll take a little bit longer, but you'll get where you're going. And actually, you know, people who've taken on something of their own free will are going to get a lot more out of it than someone who's been told to do something.
So where does digital learning fit into the ecosystem? Is it everything? Is it 5%? How does it work? Because you came from 7 years ago, you inherited a very traditional organisation where most stuff was face to face. Where are you now? How does it work?
Well, when I joined 7 years ago, I joined on one of our operations graduate schemes. So I was actually, you know, what a typical learner. I was an operational manager. Back then, it was all face to face. There was tiny amounts of, say, more compliance-based e-learning. Now, I'd say that time-wise, it's still face to face is still king, and I think we've got a long way to go, especially for big programs where we're pushing a lot of managers through. I think it's become a bit of a crutch, and I think that we've still got a way to go with it. But digital now has become it's a larger pool, but because it's more bite size, it's still little snippets rather than huge chunks. What I think we haven't quite cracked yet is the proper blended, I will call it, you know, real use of both in the same space.
Integrated.
So we've done all sorts of things in the digital space. We've done video, we've done webinars, we've done kind of user-generated stuff, we've done little snippets, we've done big e-learning courses, we've done the whole spectrum, but I don't think we've quite cracked that integrated blend.
Yeah. So if we look at the experience of the learner, now a lot of people who work for the post office don't necessarily have digital tools at their fingertips, and they're often out of the building.
Yeah.
How do you cope with all of that? How do you create access for people who traditionally wouldn't have access?
It's difficult. So we, in Royal Mail, we've got around about 140,000 employees. Around about 110, 120,000 of those are postmen, as they're on every street every day. You can't get away from that size of workforce. But we quite unceremoniously call them unconnected users in my team. They are very unconnected, as you've said. The only piece of kit that they have is a PDA. So when you get your parcels delivered, they might scan and ask you to sign. And we're just about to do a major regeneration of that kit. We've decided what device we're using, and quite excitingly, it's an Android platform. So I'm hoping that will
give them access.
Yeah, because, you know, we can have our LMS in an app form. It works very well. You know, that learning right at the point of the customer interaction is a dream for me. But you're right, at the moment, we're just not there. It's difficult. You know, their job is very much, they're in the office for a couple of hours, hectic, and then they're out on their own. There's no manager, there's no colleague, they're on their own. That is their street to deliver. So we do find that difficult to get them engaged. They do have access to all our content. We took a very brave decision when we moved to our new LMS, and we went for a single catalogue. So if you're a postman, you can see the leadership courses, you can see the executive courses, you can aspire, hopefully, for some people to go on those one day. So they have access. We've completely taken any barriers away to access, because we know that the people who will take the time to go and look are the ones who are doing it at home, in their own time, on their own equipment. So actually, I think it was the right choice to kind of take any barriers that we had in the way.
So can I do it on any device in any place that's got an internet connection?
Yeah, all our postmen women have a unique log on to the LMS, and they can get on from from anywhere. Yeah, anywhere. And say we do our LMS does support an app version. We haven't quite cracked how we're going to use that yet, but it works very well on a mobile browser, so a tablet or smartphone. Content wise, we haven't done a lot of content that's scalable, that's adaptable. We just haven't bothered because we know the profile of our learner at this point in time is just nowhere near. It's absolutely nowhere near. Our managers are still 95% plus completing things on a laptop. So it wasn't cost effective or sensible for us to do it now, but in the future, definitely. Saying that device in those guys' hands out on the streets is where I think the future will be for those.
So what is the impact of digital learning in Royal Mail? Can you sum up? Can you give an example? How has it helped the organisation? Obviously, it's helped it in functional ways, like about safety or about one of the other. But is there a bigger picture emerging from that constant access and open access?
It's quite an integral part of a big culture change journey that we're going on, as well as all the physical change and the operational change. We've got a real aspiration to change the culture in the business. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with the current one, but we did a huge study and identified that there was a real lack of a unifying culture that we wanted as a business. So digital learning is a big part of that because it symbolises a lot of the good things about these new culture and values. Our new values are be positive, be brilliant, and be part of it, right? So positive is how I approach all our learning. We always make it fun, we make it memorable, we make it really upbeat. Be brilliant is all about how great it is, and you take a lot of time spending time with the learners, making sure the content's really good and relevant. And then the big part of it is our social side. So we've started experimenting with a social platform that bolts onto our LMS, which is going brilliantly. So it's a huge part of that bigger piece on changing the culture.
And making the place seem more accessible, friendlier, and more transparent as well. If you can see everything. My absolute next question was about the social dimension around it. And how are you building that? Is it on free access again? Is it based around forums or questions, or is it just anyone can do anything and say anything to anyone else?
Quite. So we don't have, we experimented with Yammer, with Google Plus, with various things in the business, and we never really did a lot with it. And it wasn't really learning driving it at that time, it was other parts of the business. And we got the opportunity to try out the social platform because it's from the same supplier as our LMS and it seamlessly integrates. So when I, as a user, if I have access to the social platform, when I search the LMS, it brings the social content up as well as the formal content, which is brilliant. And that's why we wanted to go with this. It's built around groups, very similar in interface to a Facebook group. So I can, in collaboration with the designers in my team, make it look really beautiful and branded. But we can also architect the groups depending on the purpose. So some groups are very consumption based. So there's not actually that much interaction. Maybe people are making the odd comment, but it's not so much. Some are really about discussion and helping each other. Our new graduate intake took to it like ducks to water, as you can imagine, and they've had a field day with it. But it's architected around groups. At the moment, we've got about 1,200 managers using it as a pilot, because as you've said, that issue of people saying anything at any time to anyone is something you've got to play with.
Can be an issue.
But beautifully, again, the way that this social platform works, it's seamlessly integrated to your entire HR profile. So there's no hiding, there's no anonymity, it's very open. And as such, we found that people behave in a different way. They do behave in a very professional manner. And we spoke to customers. There's another customer of the same product who has about 150,000 users, and they've had one incident in 10 years of sort of poor behaviour that had to be challenged. And someone said to me, well, what happens if someone, makes a comment about the CEO or something awful? And I said, well, what would happen if they did it in a meeting or walking down the corridor in the office, or they wrote it on a whiteboard in a meeting room? It's the exact same. We've got processes in place to deal with that. It applies in the same way. It's no different just because it's a comment on a forum.
And also you find that those sorts of forums are self-healing, that someone will say, Emma, that wasn't a really appropriate comment. I think you should revise that. And mostly things are fixed within seconds because the community looks after itself. If it's strong enough, and it will therefore self-manage, and people learn what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate because the community will tell them, as well as having user guidelines. So the idea of trying to police it
it's really counterintuitive,
yeah,
and it just kills
and
it.
impossible.
Yeah.
And ultimately a waste of time.
Yeah, and so the way we've architected it around groups, each group does have a really specific purpose. So although you can search the overall content, each group itself has a really specific purpose, be it a community, so the new graduate intake or new employees, or be it a topic-based group. We've got things like the bane of my life is people wanting Microsoft Office training. And why should I spend, quite frankly, a very limited budget on that when I've got 150,000 employees, of which there'll be a few hundred who are really darn good at it themselves? So we build topic-based groups around things like that, where we bring curated content in and get people to sort of help themselves.
And point them to YouTube, where
exactly.
virtually everything is explained in beautiful clarity, and it's all free.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true. I'm going to see if there are any questions coming in, because people can ask questions, and if you'd like to, then please put a text question in, and we'll deal with it. First question. What are the components of your team? What skills have you developed or brought in building a digital learning team?
Well, there are an account now. I've got to count because I had vacancies for a while, and I've got to remember how many people I've got. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6, including myself.
Yeah.
I always have a bit of a joke, and James is my sort of second in command in my team. James and I, what we call L&D frauds, right? James and I. In fact, no one in my team has an L&D background. We've been in L&D for 6 months. I was a graphic designer by trade. That's what I trained at university. And then I was in communications for a long time and marketing. So I came into learning because I was a grumpy customer of learning. I was the person that was saying, I don't like this. It's boring. It's rubbish. I'm fed up of it. Yeah. And someone said to me, well, next time there's a reshuffle, how about you throw your hat in the ring and give it a bash? So I came in with that background. I've got a graphic designer who, again, no L&D background, but he's purely because as my team grew, I could spend less time doing that side of things. So I've got a graphic designer. I've got a systems expert to look after the LMS, because it's very important that we keep that to the top of its game. We've seen what happens when you leave it to go to seed. It's not pretty. So I've got a systems expert. I've got an administrator who helps with I'll say the boring stuff, but the catalogue management and all the things that are necessary to keep your function credible, because that's really important to me. And so I say Rob and Laura are very systems based. Andy's the designer. James and I are just, well, geeks, as my boss calls us. We really enjoy getting down and learning about what's going on in the marketplace and what technologies are out there and things like that.
So what is your background? If you're not an L&D background, by the way, there was a tweet this morning which said, hey, this conference is great. Hardly any of the presenters come from an L&D background. And so that is, that's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon. No, so say I trained in graphic design, and I did internal communications in the business for a long time, marketing roles, that kind of thing. So creative, and I think that's the thing. If you're creative, you will create learning that will be interesting to your learners, I think, or you're more akin to. And I find that we can buy in expertise that we need, or we can, there's other people in the L&D team outside of the direct digital area who are proper L&D thoroughbreds and have got the knowledge that we can tap into when it comes to instructional design, script writing, copywriting, all that sort of stuff. And I think that we complement really well. And I think that when you're in a space like digital learning, which is still fairly new, it's emerging, it's growing, you need people who are creative, confident, outgoing, can build credibility in a short space of time, which is what we've had to do.
Sure.
Because a lot of stuff that we do is sort of experiments that we get away with because of who we are, I think, a lot of the time.
But if you didn't do experiments, you'd never move forward.
Never get
anywhere. So any other questions out there? Has anyone got a question they'd like to ask us? One other question that's coming in is about what do you actually do? What tools do you use when you build stuff? Is it all the same, or do you have multiple options based on need and budget and speed and all that kind of stuff?
Well, since we've only kind of been doing this to say 6 to 8 months, it feels like a lifetime, but it's not. We've kind of tried a few different approaches. So we made the decision that we would outsource the real bespoke development, because I either had to really bring in a full in-house team, or I had to close the door and say, let's do that outsourced. So we work with a range of suppliers, work with all sorts of suppliers who do have real heavy bespoke content.
So you commission, basically?
Yeah, we commission on a project by project basis for the real chunky stuff. In-house, we do use the typical authoring tools. We use Captivate, we use Storyline, we use things like that to develop. But what we found that's really fun to do, I mean, when we're filming, we use iPhones, right? The only thing you need to sort out for an iPhone is a bit of audio, a couple of Bluetooth mics, jobs are good, and the quality is exceptional. But we use a couple of free tools that are not designed for the learning community, I don't think, Adobe Slate and Adobe Voice. So Slate and Voice, they were iPad apps, but you can get desktop apps now. You can knock together a piece of content in literally minutes, and all the templates are there for you. You drop and drag pictures in and different typefaces and stuff like that. And you can go from something that may have been a black and white A4 sheet of paper, like a briefing, for example, and you can create it into a really nice little piece of content that's quite engaging. You can record your own voiceover, all that sort of stuff. So we've used those in team, but what we're doing now is we're starting to educate people around the business on how to do it themselves, because that user-generated thing is absolutely going to have to be the next step for us.
How are you doing on that journey? Have you got any user-generated content?
Yeah, we do actually. Again, we were quite early adopters of it. So we've got a big community of postmen who are workplace coaches. So they are designated in their offices as the person to go to for advice, or if something changes, or you're a new person starting, and they have for years been creating content, but it was never really, no one put two and two together and thought, oh, this is learning, we should sort of capture this and harness it and not ruin it, but not control it, but just be aware that it's happening and be aware of the value of it. And so they were constantly coming up with, work systems, how-to sheets, that kind of stuff, and we've just started to integrate better with them and help them, because we think if we give them a bit more education on the newer tools that are available and the different tools that are available, they will fly with that.
Sure they will. We've got a question, so thank you very much for the question. Barbara.
Sure. So we've got a question from Kate Graham, who said that she's intrigued by the unconnected audience that you have, and can you talk more about those challenges?
So an unconnected audience, there's a few things about that audience as well, I suppose, is that they're typically long-serving. We don't really recognise long service until you get to 20 years. So that just gives you an idea of where we're at. So they are typically older. I think the average age is in early 50s. That doesn't mean that, I think a lot of preconceptions come with that. People think that means that they're not savvy, and they're not, but that's, in my view, rubbish. And I've seen some, I haven't yet done studies of our own workforce, but I went to see a guy from Boots, and we had a really good chat, and I looked at some of the work that they've done, and they actually found that there's quite an interesting profile, in that your younger generation are really good. Your 30s to 40s is a bit of a lull, and then actually 50 plus it starts to peak again. And he called it the grandparent effect, and it's people who have grandchildren who are bringing the iPad round, they're playing games, they're doing this sort of stuff. So big unconnected audience. The age profiles on the upper end, they tend to be very long serving, so they haven't experienced what other organisations do in terms of learning and development. So as I just mentioned, we have the workplace coaches. They're our key, because they are our eyes and ears on the ground in every office every day. And no one's L&D functions are growing nowadays, right? They're only ever going to be shrinking, I think, unfortunately, as we're expected to do more with less. So they are our key. They are our, we call them the sort of virtual team. They are our virtual team. And they're peers as well, which is great. They are just another postman. They all do the same job. This person is just a sort of natural coach. So we're doing a lot more with those, as I've said, to upskill them so they can create better content themselves, so they have better access to content, so that they can better tell us what they're doing, so we can try and measure it. The holy grail. It's all about results and measurement at the end of the day. So we're doing a lot more with them for the unconnected users. But I wish we could do more. And
what is the ultimate aim? Because I suppose the post office is almost unique in that you touch every single human being, everyone
every day,
every day. Everyone confronts the post office, and in some ways, when you do a job well, no one notices. It's only when it goes wrong that people notice. So, what is the bigger picture? What are you trying to do with your unconnected workforce, and even your managers and your connected workforce? Are you trying to be more efficient? You're trying to give better customer service? You're trying to be friendly? What is the bigger picture?
It's a balance. So, as I said, we're doing a lot with sort of a new culture and values set. But there's a balance. We have a scorecard that's balanced with customer is at the heart of everything we do. Exactly as you said. We, from the receiving customer, sat behind the post box, to the guys who are actually spending money on postage as posting customers. That is the heart of what we do, and that's where that's the bit that pulls at the heartstrings of our people as well. You know, although we're a private company now, we were a public company, we're a service industry to our people, really. They still see that as kind of the heart of the business. And you're right, we're out there. People when I was a comms manager, I used to love this. Posties are saving people's lives on a daily basis. They literally are saving people's lives who collapse in their homes and things like that. And it's that sense of community and customer belonging that I think is the key to getting them engaged in learning. So that's where we're making a start. So with this new stuff, we're making a start in the customer arena. So we're doing a lot more to help them be better servers of the customers.
You're right, because unlike a DHL driver who you will
Totally
see once,
relationship,
it's a
isn't
totally
it?
different relationship.
Yeah, they are.
And
the
to
heart of
build
communities.
and develop that relationship is probably very good for the post office.
Yeah.
You know, if you're seen, if the postman is seen as part of your community rather than the stranger who appears for a few minutes every week.
Yeah, and obviously efficiency is important.
Yes, of course it
We've
is.
we've
Yes.
got to survive.
Yes, of course.
And while we have to deliver to every address 6 days a week,
Yeah.
we've got to sustain that, you know, so we have to be efficient and profitable. And they get that. Our workforce get that. That's the real winner that we're onto with them, is that they completely get it. And I think that we had fallen victim a few years ago into almost like preaching to the converted. We spent a lot of time telling them about the competition and the need to be efficient, etc. And they knew it, because they're out, exactly as you said, they're out every day. They see it on the streets. They see the DHL driver pulling up in the drivers there with the letters. They know that's happening. So we're now trying to get a bit more ahead of the game and actually give them learning and give them content that will help them beat the competition and sort of carry on being successful for another 600 years.
Yeah, that's probably the agenda. It probably is a 600-year agenda. We're going to need to be communicated with, and we're going to need stuff for as long as we can see. Just turn the conversation around. Just talk a bit about Emma Barrow. But where do you think you've already made one massive career transition successfully? Where next? Do you see L&D as being your permanent home, or do you move into a different kind of communications role from this point on? Where do you see it going?
I want to hang around in L&D for a bit longer.
Okay.
I want to hang around in L&D for a bit longer. So I'm one of those people that I don't think I'm ever going to know what I want to do. But as long as I don't get bored, as long as there's still something new, I am a learner myself. I love learning. I'm constantly reading, doing online courses. I am obsessed. And I am one of those people that realizes that pretty much everything I do is learning. So while that maintains some fun for me, and while that, you know, there's always more to learn, I think I'll hang around for another couple of years at least. You know, having a creative background, that is my passion and that is what drives me. And I love to create new ideas. You know, I wouldn't say no to going to the other side of the table and work on the supplier side perhaps, because I really do like getting stuck in situations and coming up with concepts and ideas. So hopefully in the future, potentially work for myself, something like that. Once the mortgage is a little bit smaller.
And what are you learning at the moment? Just tell me a couple of things. Where are you focusing? Give me some examples.
So I am doing a Future Learn course on the Internet of Things at the moment.
Right, I know that. It's an amazing program. Yes, I've seen that.
So I'm fascinated by the connected home and all that kind of stuff, because I think that is the future, and that is for someone who works at Royal Mail, but also, you know, close links to retail sector, etc. That is what's going to drive consumer behaviour differently in the future. So Internet of Things is one. What else have I got on the go at the moment? I've been reading some business books actually, because I'm about to move jobs actually. It's still in L&D, a very similar role, but for a different organisation. So I always do this. Every time I change role, I suddenly have this kind of slight identity crisis. As I said, I feel a bit of a fraud because I didn't come from a traditional business background. So I'm reading a couple of what they didn't teach you at Harvard Business School is one. And I can't remember the other one. And then this morning, the keynote address this morning reminded me that I need to dig out my copy of the Checklist Manifesto, because that is a great book. I'm glad to see people talking about that today as well.
Yes, because it's been out.
It's been out a
long time, and yet it's suddenly come into prominence again. People realise some of the little things are the good things. The whole performance support area is vital. And he really nails that.
He gets it because there's statistics there, there's evidence.
It saves lives. It's great. Okay, that's absolutely brilliant. Emma, lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for being so open and engaging with us. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it too. And we're recording it, so it'll be around for a while to come. Thank you very much indeed.